So if you decided to listen to the following episode, you'd most likely fall into three specific categories. You're either a Vancouver Canucks fan that needs a refresher on what could be argued was the longest season in franchise history. You might be a fan from a different franchise that, like a person slowly driving by a car accident without being able to look away, is terribly curious about how the Canucks fans had gotten into that wreck in the first place. Or, finally, to put things bluntly, a sadist. The following is a step-by-step journey of the 2021-2022 Vancouver Canucks.
To be honest, there have been some rumblings over the past couple of weeks that the Canucks would be interested in an OEL Connor Garland package. Mm-hmm. And I sat there and I would say, how on earth are we going to get there?
Former Vancouver Canucks forward Jake Virtanen has been charged with sex assault.
Before I walked in to talk to you guys, and he was on his way to get vaccinated. He went over to the pharmacy, some second thoughts, I guess.
Long negotiation, but I'm happy we're going to get terms, and I'm glad we're here now and we can put that behind us. So excited to be here.
Yeah, Jimmy Benning and company, they're living it one day at a time out there in Vancouver, and they'll kick that down the curb happily.
There's a lot of noise, a lot of talk. You have a lot of noise and a lot of talk, and the media makes a lot of noise and a lot of talk. It's not the same in the locker room.
It's unacceptable. I mean, at the end of the day.
If, they get to a point where, they don't feel like, I'm doing a good job or I need to be replaced, they'll make that decision.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us in our latest installment and arguably our most thorough and detailed installment of our Pucks on Net Deep Dive series. We've done a few of these in the past on the 2010-2011 Canucks, on the Philadelphia Flyers 2011-2012, the Canucks of 03-04. Any year of a team's infancy that is intriguing, is ripe with controversy or change or on or off ice theatrics. And this past year that we just witnessed as Canucks fans, it was probably the most long-winded, catastrophic season in Canucks history. Some of the biggest change you'll ever see, some of the biggest turnaround, and one of the biggest turnarounds from a fan perspective and from an on-ice perspective. It's me, Ryan, and Arash, and we'll be breaking this down for you. Arash, are you excited to break down this hockey team? Have you been dreading it? It's the middle of summer. What are your thoughts going into this?
I am so tired. I don't know. This seemed like a good idea like 6 months ago, and then we came back to it. And every time, it's very funny, every time I talk to some of the following guests that we have on this pod, pretty much verbatim, each one of them looked almost baffled that we were attempting to do this.
You want to relive that?
Yeah.
Really?
I swear there's a clip of one Matthew Sekeres pretty much verbatim saying, like, really? Why would you do that to yourself? But I think this is a really, really opportune time for us to look back at a very hard season for fans of this franchise, especially considering what they've gone through in the last 7 to 8 years. That, we could touch on it. We could go back and explain and hold everyone's hand and explain how the tea kettle kind of boiled over. But I think it's very interesting just to highlight this one season where there became an impasse between fans, this market, media, ownership, coaching, managers, and something had to change. And it was pretty baffling, from the summer of 2021 into eventually what turns into today, that the season really ended only technically only ended about, a month ago.
And that apathy and that just confusion that split the fan base, it happened organically through several key factors of the previous organization. And the first thing that we start off discussing, we're par for the course for them. Misguided operation, very poor planning and communication, and just about everybody left in the dark. And we begin this deep dive with the announcement of the Abbotsford Canucks. Several days delayed. On July 14th, it was Jim Benning, the mayor of Abbotsford, in a rather slapped-together press conference and photo op, unveiled the Abbotsford Canucks jerseys, the arena, and not much else. This came after the announcement was delayed a few days, and nobody really had a reason why. And it was another example of, shouldn't they have a reason why? And it was another instance that made you lose a lot of faith in the direction of this organization. And it was an underwhelming reveal, and it was unfortunately set the tone for the Abbotsford Canucks for the whole year.
Yeah, I mean, the Abbotsford Canucks eventually, once we get into the free agent signings, they had gotten that closer to home farm team finally. Oddly enough, for people who have been following this team for long enough, did not have any prospects really to ice a proper team, especially considering the fact that they've been technically rebuilding for a majority of the last decade, or attempting to, or should have been. I don't know. That's part of the problem, is that what we should have been doing and what was told we were doing were completely different things. They were not consistent in that marketing. So Canucks fans have become very familiar with the idea of, whenever good news happens, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop. We're saying, oh, well, okay, well, we got we have a farm team closer to our home arena and our home team in the same province. And then I can just remember that day where, it gets delayed and everything is very thrown together. And we're wondering, okay, this is kind of par for the course going forward.
Yeah. And, you're talking about waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that shoe dropped about 9 days later. It's very easy to forget at this time, that this front office, Jim Benning and John Weisbrod, had a big effort, a big desire, a judgment-clouding thirst to acquire Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They tried their damnedest in the shortened, oddly placed October 2020 offseason after the bubble Stanley Cup playoffs. And some might argue that it's because of this fixation on Oliver Ekman-Larsson that maybe they forgot to send a qualifying offer, not a qualifying offer, but a offer in general to free agents Chris Tanev and Tyler Toffoli. And, we had an episode out at the time called Oliver Ekman Distraction, and we kind of hoped that was in the past. And somewhat out of nowhere, Arash, this trade happened. This absolute bomb of a deal went off on July 23rd, 2021. And it was another example of a Jim Benning-led trade where you hear the first part of it and it doesn't sound too bad, and then you move your finger off down the paper and you realize you were covering more that was going the other way. So in this trade on July 23rd, Vancouver traded their 9th pick that year, Jay Beagle, Antoine Roussel, and Louis Eriksson, to Arizona for Oliver Ekman-Larsson with a whopping 12% salary retained and the RFA rights to Connor Garland, who promptly signed a 5x5 contract with the Canucks. Vancouver also decided to trade their 2nd-round pick in 2022 and their 7th-round pick in 2023. Sekeres and Price co-host Matt Sekeres on his initial thoughts of the Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade.
Well, when I first heard the trade, I said to myself, this is alarming because it has all the hallmarks of a general manager mortgaging the future to save his own ass. We had seen vestiges of that prior to the OEL Garland trade, but that's when they went all in. Let's face it. Look, for my money, as I sat there and looked at the Vancouver Canucks last year prior to the OEL Garland team trade, I didn't see a team that was anywhere close to being a Stanley Cup contender. I saw a team that probably needed to do a few things just to make the playoffs. And so there we were in the 8th year of Jim Benning's administration, committing that many future resources to hopefully building a playoff team for the coming year. And of course, having to hold the OEL contract for as long as they're going to have to hold this thing.
Well, it's really interesting because, when I heard this trade had went down, when he dropped into Canucks Twitter and basically social media, I think everyone knew what this trade was, but due to the last 7 to 8 years, there was an ability for Canucks fans to kind of gaslight themselves into thinking, okay, this is not as bad as it looks on paper, right? And the deal itself, I mean, you could argue that, oh, well, Connor Garland's a nice piece, and people were kind of debating, oh, well, if it's the 9th pick for Connor Garland and then everyone else for OEL's contract, well, and then you have the 2nd round pick and the 7th round pick. And what it eventually turned into with how this season kind of devolved from there, whereas it was very clear this was a last shot of someone who knew that basically their time had come up. Yes. And this is a classic thing we've seen. If it's Peter Chiarelli in Edmonton, with the kiss of death Mikko Koskinen deal, one day or so before he's let go, it was a bit tough to stomach, but also Canucks fans might have been a little excited just because they thought, okay, well, if OEL bounces back, and Connor Garland's a top 6 winger, and we just want some good news. And they had this almost forced optimism to this deal, even though when you looked at it on paper, you said, okay, you are taking on, in terms of Oliver Ekman-Larsson and the player that he is, I'm not to say he's a bad player, but the contract that he was on was a gross overpayment of the player that probably he is now and going forward. And there's, after this season, 5 years left at $7 million, was that you had 1 year left. You had 1 year that you had to wait it out with Beagle, Roussel, and Eriksson. Pretty much at the end of is Andy Dufresne at the end of Shawshank, where he comes out of the drainage pipe and he's free finally. And what this trade hinged on, and always hinged on, was that the Canucks needed to make the playoffs in the following season, and not only make the playoffs, but do some damage in the playoffs for there to be even any discussion that this trade was in any semblance worth it. I mean, it's like betting in Vegas. You just bet on something that had a ludicrously low percentage of happening. The payoff wasn't great, and you also had to give up a lot of money. Like, it was the inverse of a good bet.
And Arash, like every element of that return, both players had to play absolutely out of their, they had to be leaps and bounds better with the Canucks than they were in their previous years with Arizona. Not saying they were bad, but for what they gave up and what they could have given up, or
what was Ryan? What was the best case scenario of
the first round against the St. Louis Blues?
No, the best. Listen, the only way I think this trade goes down as being a successful deal is if the Canucks in the following season, 2021-2022, the one that's coming up, win the Stanley Cup or make the Stanley Cup final.
I mean, let's face it, they were fooling themselves. They were kidding themselves. There was a lot of hope behind that evaluation, and not necessarily enough reality. The organization had taken so many hits. It was so clear that the Vancouver Canucks had fallen towards the bottom of the NHL in terms of best run organizations. I mean, they were closer to Arizona than they were to Tampa. That I think there was, as a knee-jerk defense mechanism, short-term thinking, this is a good trade for us without consideration of the long term. Could Oliver Ekman-Larsson get better outside of, playing in a minor league market like Phoenix? I suppose. Did it happen? No.
The Arizona Coyotes would go on to draft Dylan Guenther, a right wing for the Edmonton Oil Kings. He finished the 2021-22 season with 45 goals, 46 assists, and 91 points. But what this was another year of Trader Jim trading away his first-round pick. A general manager whose big announcement and introduction to this market was draft picks are going to be a lifeblood of this organization, and every opportunity he got, he moved them away. And as we discussed, when it became time to move the Abbotsford Canucks to close to home, there was nothing to bring up because there was no prospect cupboard. 2 days later, following that trade, Jake Virtanen's bought out after the Vancouver Police Department formally charged him with sexual assault for an incident that happened in the preseason of the 2017 Canucks season. But it was another very dark spot, another black eye on the organization, and on a player that got so many second chances, the longest leash, given so many show me contracts, and letting other players walk because they figured, we got it in Jake, this is the year we get it from Jake, this is the year that Jake figures it out, and it blew up in their face like a firecracker as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, I think because I don't want to touch on this any more than we have to, because to be honest, this was a person that was given so many chances in the NHL. They were given so many chances to become a better player, to adapt, to evolve, to get out of the mindset that they still had in junior. And sadly, even with being given those opportunities, being given those chances, if you don't understand the value of that opportunity, the value of that chance, you're just really, you're just squandering. This is something that this person's going to look back on, but I think this is probably going to be the second regret of his life going forward. And, the first regret is most likely not being a better human being, not being a better empathetic man in a world that was catered around him. Mm-hmm. Not to make jumping assumptions or anything as the courts are still ongoing, but yeah, I'm glad it's over. I'm glad we're still not talking about it. And man, what a journey from 2014 to now.
Yeah. One of the common threads of the betting organization was a lack of communication, a lack of direction. When we had Sean Mathias on the episode last year, he was very frank and honest about a complete lack of dialogue with his general manager or his front office for that matter. And 2 days after Jake is bought out, the Canucks make a trade. Nate Schmidt, a very serviceable defenseman who they acquired in a Christian Ehrhoff-like panic salary dump by a Western Conference team. They got him for very little. And following 1 year in Vancouver where Nate Schmidt just didn't seem to fit in with that roster, he always seemed a little out of place out there. He was quickly and quietly traded to Winnipeg for a third-round pick in 2022. And another example of another example of poor asset management, Braden Holtby bought out. And it was once they did that, they signed their Connor Garland deal, a 5-year extension worth 4.95 average. Arash, did it make any sense to you at the time why Nate Schmidt was traded the way he was, following his acquisition and following him being essentially everything the Canucks needed?
I think if you look back at the season previous to this, which is the COVID-riddled season, you see two pieces here, especially Braden Holtby, whom, go on to say it basically felt like 3 years in a Canucks uniform, where that season would not end. It was exhausting. In terms of Nate Schmidt, it just seemed like he didn't exactly fit. I don't know what it was. I don't think we still know what it was. But they basically said, you can come back to Vancouver or you can go to Winnipeg. Decide. And, the fact that they can go and recoup a third, that's fine. The salary cap is king. They can make salary cap space. But again, they go and give Connor Garland that 5-year extension. So it is what it is. It's 1 year of a player that they got a W on, and it didn't work for whatever reason. They got their pick back. No harm done.
That Nate Schmidt was an interesting case because you would hear rumblings through local beat writers that he didn't, just the day-to-day operations of the organization rubbed him the wrong way in some capacity. And nobody really said exactly what or why, but it just seemed like it didn't jive with him, and he just wanted to be in a different organization. And it was one of the latest red flag in this preseason of what exactly is going on here, who's running this ship, who knows who's steering this boat.
Mm-hmm. And so the day after trading Nate Schmidt to the Winnipeg Jets for a third rounder, Braden Holtby being bought out and Connor Garland getting his contract extension, July 28th, the Canucks are doing a lot of work. This might have been one of the busiest days in Canucks history in terms of strictly just signings. I remember very clearly on how busy this day was. So the Canucks end up signing in one day Kyle Burrows, Philip DiGiuseppe, Justin Dowling, Sheldon Dries, Yaroslav Halak, Brad Hunt, Brady Keeper, Nick Patan, Sheldon Rempel, Luke Shen is now finally back with Vancouver Canucks, Devontae Stevens, John Stevens, and what might have been the most baffling contract given out at the opening of free agency. Tucker Poolman is given a 4-year contract at $2.5 million per. This is a player that had, I believe, 1 goal and 0 assists, but just because he played, I believe, with Josh Morrissey in Winnipeg, was deemed to be this fit. And when this trade went down, or not this trade, this signing went down right now, I don't know about you, but it kind of took any positivity or any kind of goodwill that they had built up with this fan base totally out of the sails.
Well, one of the key themes going into this offseason was they're getting rid of the bad contracts. We had been saddled with Antoine Roussel, Louis Eriksson, especially Louis Eriksson, and Jay Beagle for so many years. Every year it was, look how much money your fourth line makes, look how much your depth guys make, and look what they produce. So it felt good to get some bad contracts out of our mind, and they were bringing in these value deals. Luke Shen, we had no idea what he would turn into. Justin Dowling, we were hopeful that he would be serviceable, and then they just seemed to buy just about anybody. Now, one of the main reasons was to build a roster in Abbotsford, but how quickly we forget in years past, the Canucks would get injured. The Canucks would get very banged up. COVID year before, they would be looking for warm bodies. This organization would be making, it felt like there was always deals bringing just anybody into play, either in Utica or now in Abbotsford or in the Canucks bottom 6. So when all these deals happened, you saw guys like Brad Hunt being signed. Oh, there's your 7th defenseman. There's your 8th defenseman. All of this depth that you hope would finally give this team, the ability to get hurt and not be completely up shit creek without a paddle. But then Tucker Poolman gets signed. And you wonder, okay, you don't have a lot of cap space. You have a lot of dead space. You are giving a lot of people money not to play here. And this is somebody that, it reminds me of when Robinson Cano signed for the Seattle Mariners, when the Mariners actually outbid themselves Did Jim, like, who else was in on Tucker Poolman for that type of money in the NHL with such little revenue and such a flat cap and nowhere to budge? It made no sense to see that contract being signed.
How did I know that you would fit in a Seattle Mariners reference into this episode?
Anytime.
Anyway, Canucks.
Anytime a player seems to, there only seems to be interest from one team, and the number they get keeps getting bigger and bigger, I will always remember that. And it always seemed to be the case here in Vancouver with this previous regime.
Amen. The Canucks also re-signed Travis Hamonic and Brandon Sutter as well. Brandon Sutter, unfortunately, was dealt the long COVID card coming into this following season, so we actually didn't see him suit up. Well, we can only hope that, his health comes first, his family comes first. But I also remember, him being signed, I believe it was a 1 year, $1.125 million contract.
I was stoked on that.
It was, I think everyone was stoked because now you've carefully and correctly slotted the player in the price point and the position on your roster. And if he were here, to start the season, I have no doubt that if he was not dealing with long COVID, that you'd have the exact fourth line center that this team needed the entire season. Beyond going and trying different looks and trying different players in terms of certain players that they've acquired since then. But July 31st, the Canucks also trade future considerations to Tampa Bay for Spencer Martin. Spencer Martin would end up being quite a interesting part of this story coming into the second half of the following season. But essentially, just again, roster depth in Abbotsford. They needed a goalie. It was very apparent from last year where, again, Michael DiPietro's growth has been stunted. And it always seemed that they needed that third goalie. Then they needed that person to come and insulate behind whomever was starting. If it was Markstrom and Demko, et cetera, you needed that backup. But yeah, they had gotten Yaroslav Halak, but you just need a bit more insulation there.
Arash, it's also easy to forget to circle back to Brandon Sutter. I watching him in the bubble in those three series, he was playing at his
inspired hockey. Very inspired hockey.
You grew to admire him, and that is what you wanted to see out of Brandon Sutter, playing inspired, meaningful hockey in playoff games in August, just like every boy dreams about. But it was always that price tag. And then even in the shortened 2021 season, he finally got his first hat trick. He was contributing. He was kind of, aging gracefully. And for him to sign a sensible deal, again, all of this summer was about sensible deals with the exception of Tucker Poolman, and it felt good. It was blind optimism. We've buried our heads in the sand about what we have given up to get rid of Eriksson and Roussel and Beagle. But hey, he's figuring it out. There was so much. It always seemed like Benning was learning this job on the fly, and it was always through serious trial and error. It was like a teenager having the job. Like it was a teenager in his first car, and if you learn not to beat the crap out of it, it's you're not going to spend so much on car repairs. That was him every year, and you would joke about it, like, oh, he's learning, he's evolving, but then you'd be like, no, he's learning this step by step on the job.
I think,
and that's not what he should be doing.
Right. I think the word that we're looking for is consistency. Throughout the last 7 to 8 years, the only thing this fan base was looking for was consistency. Consistency in messaging, consistency in moves, consistency in vision. They were not given any of that. So every time a move was made, any trust, semblance of a base of, understanding would be thrown out the window. Because if, not to bring it back to my childhood, but my parents a long time ago took me down to a trip in California and told me we're going to Disneyland. On the 5th day, they told me Disneyland was closed. And Disneyland was not closed. They were just running low on time. And now I am a 32-year-old man, and every time my parents ever promise me anything, I don't get disappointed. And they're like, what, you're not angry? I'm like, yeah, it's Disneyland. It's fine. But sadly, I hope Jim Benning gets to go to Disneyland one day, because everyone should go to Disneyland. So August,
we have not gone to. Neither one of us have gone to Disneyland. Arash, we'll cross that off the list.
You think the Marvel universe is a rap lyric? Okay, August 9th.
Butterbeer.
Butterbeer. That's not even. August 9th, Canucks re-sign Olli Juolevi to a 1-year deal.
He was my Jake Virtanen, and I hate saying his name or in a positive way, but he was our defensive version of old JV18.
I don't know. Okay, I
wanted to see him. Do his absolute best.
I think the difference between Olli Juolevi and Jake Virtanen is that Olli Juolevi was dealing with some pretty serious injury issues. His development got stunted. Through that, he unfortunately could not pivot to defend. So he was getting blown by defenders constantly. And I think the death nail, the final thing...
Training camp started, out in Abbotsford, and it was just like the unveiling of the AHL team. Confusion, no real direction, nobody really saying anything. And at the absolute last minute, a press release comes out saying Travis Hamonic's going to miss some time, personal reasons. Hey, that's perfectly acceptable. These are all human beings playing. While that happens, Travis Green decides to instill a little work ethic in the team, in the bunch, and he starts doing what he loves doing, which is force them to do bag skates.
CISL Vancouver is Sportsnet 650.
The official home of the Canucks.
There's not that thought. Yeah, training camp, you should show up.
Yeah,
to be.
You should.
I show up in shape.
But clearly, the fans think otherwise.
Some fans. I don't think as far as OEL go, we actually let him off the hook earlier in the show. We're like, he's a new guy, a veteran guy. Maybe he didn't know about Travis Green's bag skate. I don't think the same. This is my opinion. I don't think we should look at it the same way with Juolevi. Juolevi was he struggled the entire bag skate. He's one of the youngest guys. If he has an excuse, fine. Well, let's hear it. But I asked Ian McIntyre this. I have never seen a player like that in Canucks training camp collapsed on the ice against the wall. Like I've seen it when I coached Pee Wee hockey, and we used to tell the kids, "Hey, get up." And that's exactly what JT Miller was saying to Olli Juolevi, like, get up. This is a bad look for you. You look like a little kid out there.
I look back on it now. This was the complete end of a player in a market that I've ever just from a photo. It encapsulated so much. And it's unfortunate because I believe, Olli Juolevi was drafted too high. Unfortunately, dealt with injury issues and everything that he went through. But man, what a way to end that specific subchapter or that specific character plot in this book that went from 2015 to now with Olli Juolevi. So he's given the bag skate. And he can, after the back skate, he assumes the fetal position as if a sniper from Call of Duty just, got you and your character ragdolls. And I don't know, Ryan, I don't know if you remember, but I believe, I might have been Bo Horvat, it might have been JT Miller, but just going over to Olli Juolevi, who's just collapsed on the ground.
Yeah.
And we remember, stories of Troy Stetcher vomiting during the back skate. This was, I don't know who took the photo. It might have been Thomas Trance, but I'm not sure. It was him laying in the fetal position, not being able on the ice, not being able to recover from the bag skate. And I think not only was it a swan song in terms of his perception with fans, not only his perception with media, but that must have been it with his perception of this organization from the organization. I think from that moment they said, all right, this player is no longer going to be a future part of our plans.
Arash, the very old school hockey saying is you don't lay on the ice unless you have two broken legs, and for the most part I'm going to agree with that, and there's a level of pride of just getting up. You're not going to lay out there dead like a fish. But it seemed like he just gave up. And for all the years of all the minor hockey, all the OHL hockey, all the hockey on the world stage, the fact that was clearly instilled on him. But he showed up to camp either mentally unprepared, physically unprepared, or both, and just essentially, I'm taking up space here. This is where I live now. That's all I have to give. And players went over and checked on him, and they weren't like, "Hey, are you okay?" You could tell you could look at the body language on them, and they're essentially saying, "Man, you got to get up. Like, what are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself."
Lay down on the. I think it was less about, okay, well, I'm sorry, not less about, but it was just you need to get up because I don't think you understand in this market what this is going to be perceived as. And it's always, not to revisionist history, but, that 2016 draft, you could, right behind him was his other London Knight compadre in that
you could
draft.
have Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weaver in a first. And
Mackenzie Weaver?
Yeah.
Are you thinking of Mike Weaver?
No, but if you just said the 2016 draft.
Oh, Mike.
Who could they have picked?
I mean, like everyone. Anyway.
Matt Tkachuk.
Yeah, Matthew Tkachuk, who is now going to just be drinking mimosas and eating Cabanos all day.
We started Canucks camp talking about no Paterson or Hughes, and as the Canucks wrap up camp here in Abbotsford on Saturday, we'll once again talk about no Paterson or Hughes. Safe to say, Ian, that the longer this goes on, the bigger problem it is for this team in many ways.
Yeah, the nearer it gets to October 13th, it does become a bigger problem. Right now, it's really an issue for fans, obviously, who want to see these star players in their team's lineup. A lot of enthusiastic fans here for training camp in Abbotsford, but when you go outside, everyone asks what's happening with Petey and Quinn.
October 1st, the month that regular season hockey was set to return, we get wind from the organization. We've received confirmation that Travis Hamonic will not be opting out this season. He remains at home, dealing with some personal matters. We continue to support him, and out of respect for the situation, we will have no further comment at this time. Again, it's always important to reiterate, these are humans. These are people with families and big decisions to make. That's fine. Travis Hamonic, if you're any player dealing with personal issues, take the time. There are more important things in hockey, and you've got a contract. You're fine. But when you are protecting his privacy, but then you also announce it on the day where NHL players have to decide if they're going to opt out if they don't want to get COVID, because that was a big thing. There was a lot of skepticism about players that didn't want to adhere to it, and it was a little bit before Tyler Bertuzzi just said, screw it, I won't play in Canada. So you put out that statement on that day, and you immediately tell the entire fan base, okay, it's the vaccine, but it's not the vaccine, and he might get it, but he's figuring it out at home. Just completely, exposed what was going on when their entire efforts were to not do that.
Bingo.
2 days later, there was something else going on that seemed to have...
Really? Was there something else going on at this time that was vitally important? I think everyone was here. We had all of our pieces, right? Everyone was at training camp. Who was?
Yeah, the only people that weren't at training camp were Brandon Sutter, long haul COVID.
Yeah.
Travis Hamonic, personal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Ole Ulevi left in the fetal position in Abbotsford.
Yeah.
They asked him to turn the lights off when he eventually got up. Oh, and right, your two franchise cornerstone players that are actually absolute game breakers, and the only thing keeping their general manager employed is the fact that he allegedly decided to pick these players. Elias Pettersson, RFA. Quinn Hughes, RFA. And much like the way this organization had done business in the past with Brock Besser, they were sitting tight. They were biding their time. They were taking away important training camp time with them, important preseason time to stubbornly get these deals done. And it was incredibly annoying because you would think when these deals aren't signed in August or September or October that it is negotiations are happening constantly around the clock or every day. Every day you'd assume it's that big of a deal. But the reports coming out at the time were that, no, the two camps haven't talked yet. And you're sitting at home wondering, these are the two cornerstone players that you want to sign as long as possible, and and their agents and your bumbling front office haven't discussed much. You can't even figure out where they are because they haven't had that dialogue yet. It was the ineptitude going into this season when you think something was done with Travis Hamonic or Ole Uelevi or Tucker Poolman or JV18, then you realize, oh, forget about all that. Your two absolute best players are stubbornly not signed. And it's because of the guy running it.
There was absolutely a sliver of time where Canucks fans thought, oh, they're just not going to be in the opening lineup. We had serious discussions. They were like, oh, okay, yeah. Well, Miller's going to play center, and he's going to be the first line center, and I don't know, what's Goldobin doing? What's Nikolai Goldobin doing? Again, yeah, so we have to also take it back to this time, understanding the front office was still bare. This was an organization basically run by two people. And the same
one person, nobody really knew what they did.
No one still to this day has any idea what this other person did outside of trading Steve Francis and going to Harvard. They have no idea what else this person has done. Yeah, I just remember going back at that time that the anxiety was just at an all-time high. And
I'm super happy to be back. It's been a long negotiation, but I'm happy we're going to get terms, and I'm back, and I'm really excited to be back.
Yeah, like Petey said, not easy being at home the last week, but I'm glad we're here now and we can put that behind us, so excited to be here.
October 7th, I swear to God, they're going to be playing a regular season game potentially with fans soon. Asset management rears its ugly head again. Jonah Gojevic went on waivers.
Gadjevich. You don't even remember his last name. Canucks lose Jonah Gadjevich on waivers to San Jose. 6 days later, Zach McEwen is lost on waivers to the eventually Stanley Cup winning Philadelphia. Oh, they didn't make the playoffs. Is lost to waivers on to the Philadelphia Flyers. Again, this is a death by 1,000 cuts as it's starting. This is like cut number 17. And we're seeing, these players that, again, Jonah Gadjevich, second-round pick. Zach McEwen was, a fourth or fifth-round pick. Players that you brought up in the system going away. Again, thankfully, Jonah Gadjevich did not end up blowing up in the Vancouver Canucks' face. He did not turn into the 40-goal scorer that some hardcore pundits of this market had proclaimed him to be. Zach McEwen, again, I feel went to the Flyers and had his own niche role, and he filled it quite well. I believe he was one of the unsung heroes for the Philadelphia Flyers at their awards. But again, we're seeing asset management again, and it won't be the last time.
There were teams that wanted them. You might have been able to get just a little bit of something for them. Just the teeny tiniest bit.
Yeah, but now we go into October 12th. Canucks sign Alex Chiasson following a solid PTO. And again, Alex Chiasson ends up being for what they needed him to be. I feel like a bit of an unsung hero through the season. He, again, didn't really cost them anything. He played with Connor McDavid the year before. He knew what his role was. Like, just sit beside the net. Just tap it in. Do what Ryan Strome couldn't do in the playoffs, was just tap it in. Yeah, so after that, Travis Hamonic clears waivers again.
It gets really weird here.
This is getting very David Lynchian now. Travis Hamonic clears waivers. He heads to Abbotsford. Again, fans, players, media, we have no idea what's going on. No one, literally, even to this day, no one knows what's going on. I think anyone who does know what's going on is so exhausted by the fact that we're only on October 12th that we're going through. But, Ryan, the Canucks, they start the campaign off with a shootout loss. It was a 3-2 loss against Edmonton. I believe OEL also scored in that game, so a nice little debut there, just to ease a little bit of anxieties. Followed by a 5-4 shootout win against Philadelphia. I believe Claude Giroux was sick for that one, or else they wouldn't have won. While waiting for the provincial government to change their event attendance policies, the NHL actually scheduled the Canucks and several other teams with long American and Albertan road trips to start the year. Strangely enough, the provincial government changed their policies just in time for the Canucks home opener and, oddly enough, allowed 100% capacity, which was league-wide at the time. Do you remember, did this have anything to do with easing perhaps maybe a little bit of your COVID fatigue? Were we a bit excited saying, oh, we can go back to games now and we can kind of maybe go back to some semblance of normalcy?
I was excited about that for sure, and we went to a handful of games, before Christmas. But it was kind of icky that it was, you can't have that many, you can't have fans in the building yet. Oh, but we probably will. But will you? I think we'll be just fine about it.
Are you sure? Maybe? No.
There was a bit of arrogance in the air, like, don't worry, things will change by then. And however you felt about COVID not vaccine mandates, but just lockdown restrictions, it just felt icky that the National Hockey League could be like, yeah, well, we're going to need fans in the building, so if you could just change that, that'd be great. And anything that you just said before that is completely contradicted by sticking fans in the building, because COVID is still a thing here. This is before Omicron, and it just became a mess. It was, well, you can have fans in the building, but you gotta wear your mask. Oh, but you can take your mask off when you're eating or drinking. Oh, but you're eating and drinking the entire time. I see. Okay.
If you have a cup of I remember this, and it's really interesting. It's just mildly infuriating to me was people who had like an empty beer cup in their hands and just walked around the concourse without a mask. And I remember going up, I believe it was a little later than this in October, but I ended up going, I believe, to the Flyers game. Yeah, I believe I went to. Yeah, did. I did. I asked a police officer, I was just like, hey, you gonna do anything about, like, you doing anything about this stuff? Like, boys will be boys. Haha, I know it's uncomfortable. A brown man is asking you about your COVID ideas, but hey, boom, we're at a Canucks game. Yeah, get her done, dude. The police officer was like, well, I mean, what can you do?
Oh, there's rules.
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, yeah, I know, right? Imagine just doing your job. Anyway, we're long past that. That's in October, so everyone, please stay safe. But in October of 2021, the Canucks go 0-3-0 at home, 3-2-1 on the road, with a record of 3-5-1. Key losses in back-to-back games. This
is going to come back to this.
This is back-breaking in terms of their losses, knowing what we know now.
Brock Besser on the left boards. Ekman Larson up top. Shot from the blue line off the glass, comes out in front. Empty net chance. This one, right on the pipe. Asplund. Sabres 5, Canucks 2.
Key losses in back-to-back road games versus Detroit and Buffalo, as well as home at Philadelphia, which, yes, no Claude Giroux was dressed there, so of course that's an L automatically. October 10th, Ryan. As we said, this was the swan song of one Olli Juolevi. October 10th, Canucks trade Olli Juolevi to the Florida Panthers for Noah Juulsen and Juho Lammikko. Juolevi showed up to training camp. It was in less than stellar shape, and again, laying in the fetal, that fetal position photo became a meme in Canucks Twitter. I believe, Cody Sievertson had a lot of fun with that one, so thank you, Cody. October 18th, Travis Hamonic is granted a leave of absence from the team. Again, everyone's in the dark. Fans, media, I don't even think the organization knew really what was going on.
Well, another thing that we forget is Jim Benning wasn't speaking to the media at all in any capacity.
In no way was he communicating at all, which honestly, Ryan, it as we're getting along perhaps closer to December, I'm going to go a little bit off the board and just say that there was an opportunity with someone in this organization that they have had in the organization for pretty much our entire lifetime that could have done the speaking for them. And for whatever reason, that man was not gifted a microphone until Ragnarok hit the Vancouver Canucks in early December.
Now, there's not much to talk about with this team because they weren't playing very good hockey. This team looked like a slow, uninspired team that we saw the year before, and not much was going on. You enter November, for the first full month of the regular season, Canucks are 3-3-1 at home and an abysmal 1-6-0 on the road. And it was every third game the Canucks kind of inspired you. In the early November, it was the Canucks barely beating the New York Rangers in Rogers Arena. Thatcher Demko doing his scorpion save to keep the minute.
Missed the pass. Tyler Myers failed to clear it. Puck is centered. Panarin banned on it. In front. Tyler missed the net. Big pile up in the goal crease. Panarin cuts in front. He shoots. Sprawl against Demko. Panarin again. Shoots. Blocked by Demko. Wild action. Demko's lost his blocker. He's waving at the referee. Demko doesn't have his blocker. He's got a bare right hand. There's another shot. And I don't know how he stopped that. Now the referee sees that Demko doesn't have his blocker. Miraculous play in the Vancouver goal crease. And a standing ovation. Bedlam at Rogers Arena.
And it was little bursts of positivity that kind of kept you thinking, okay, maybe this will be okay. It's around this time in November that you start to hear rumblings, and they've come more to fruition now. But even at the time, when terrible hockey was being played, nobody was saying anything. Nothing was getting done. You kind of heard rumblings that Benning was trying to bring his old boy from Boston, Claude Julien, in to replace Travis Green, following the Canucks' slow slump out of the gate. And at the time, it seemed, no, that's preposterous. That's exactly what he would do. There's no way he would be that short-sighted.
He absolutely would do it because he just did it how many months ago? And again, this is the fact that someone was gifted this much trust by an owner who more than likely cost this owner a tremendous amount of money.
Oh, yeah.
Strictly just from lost gate revenue of potential playoff games, buyouts, insufficient contracts. You just kind of realize, okay, there's something a bit more fishy going on. There's just something that we don't have. But in that November stretch, so I believe it was almost like that 2-week window in the middle from mid-November to early December.
Rinkwide Podcast host Jeff Paterson and Canucks radio voice Brendan Batchelor on the Canucks' struggles in November.
I think a lot of people will remember they went on that 3-game road trip that took them to Colorado, Vegas, and Anaheim, 3 games in 4 nights, and they got absolutely whacked, right? They got outscored 19-6, and it was terrible. It started with a 7-1 loss in Denver, and it didn't get a whole lot better from that.
I could remember coming home from that road trip being like, things are changing. Like, I don't know what it's going to be. And I can remember saying this on the radio at the time is something's going to change here. I don't know if it's going to be the GM. I don't know if it's going to be the head coach. I don't know if it's going to be a major trade to shake up the dressing room, but something's got to give.
And the road trip itself was brutal. The first game back after the road trip, it was a rematch against Colorado at home. Now, this was a chance at redemption. Colorado, if you'll recall, was without Nathan McKinnon. And you're thinking, all right, yeah, it's Colorado, good team, but the Canucks are at home. Like, they should be smarting from this 3-game pasting out on the road. And remember too, and it was such a huge part of the storyline then, was the Canucks penalty killing that had just been cratering for weeks to that point. And this night against Colorado, the Canucks, who had been giving up 2 power play goals on the regular, and it was brutal, they gave up 3 in a 4-2 loss at home to the Avs, and it dropped their penalty kill on the season. The penalty kill dropped to 60.3%, 17 games into the season. But wait, it gets worse. Over a 9-game stretch, the penalty kill was under 50%. There were better odds the other team was going to score with the man advantage than the Canucks were going to kill off a penalty over a 9-game stretch at the National Hockey League level.
The way that they were losing games almost wasn't that, they were losing a 3-2 game or they were losing a 2-1 game. This was almost akin to playing against someone whose controller was out of battery, and that in protest they kept trying to eject the disc out of the PlayStation or the Xbox or something. It was so uninspired in terms of the effort level, and we saw this culminating with players in interviews. Again, Jim Benning was not speaking. This was Bo Horvat coming out. This was Travis Green coming out. This was JT Miller coming out.
Truly understand where they're at, what's at stake, and where the franchise is right now?
What do you mean where the franchise is right now?
Well, there's
a lot of noise, a lot of talk. You have a lot of noise and a lot of talk, and the media makes a lot of noise and a lot of talk. It's not the same in the locker room.
It's unacceptable. I mean, at the end of the day, we are excited about this year, and it's unacceptable on us, and it's on us to try and turn this thing around.
When things aren't going well, and for this stretch amount of time, it's hard. It's really, really hard mentally to stay the course and stay use our process to win games. And I always tell you guys, it comes from moving your feet and competing. And for me, at least, and I think when we get everybody to buy in, we're a really hard team to play against.
Anybody but Jim.
But eventually, again, through kind of the mid-November, Jim Benning finally speaks to the media, Ryan.
There were several key parts that just stood out to this press conference that was just absolutely awful on so many levels.
Does it ever get to the point where it makes the job so unenjoyable you question why you're doing it or whether you should do it?
I always look at things, my whole career is based on, trying to figure things out to build, to help build teams that are competitive, that are successful, try to, like I brought it up, figure out solutions to our problems, how we can get to where we need to be, so we're winning hockey games, we're having fun, and that's not going to change for me.
The quote of that press conference, which was so perfect, and the brass ones on our friend David Quadrelli. Jim Benning kept kicking that can down the road and kept saying, hey, we're going to be competitive. I just need 2 more years. Just give me a week. I'm going to get you the rent money. The rent's going to be paid and then some. We're going to be fine, but I just need a couple days.
Last year, you said you felt you were 2 years away from being really competitive. Do you feel now it's 1 year away, or has that timeline changed?
I'm not going to comment on that right now with where we're at. We got to just figure out, how our penalty kill can be better, how our best players can perform better, how, we're a fragile team right now, how we can work through that, be mentally tougher. Those are the issues that we're dealing with right now.
It was the equivalent of the Oliu Levy picture.
Yep.
That was the end. That was the end. To me, that was the end. There was just to me, after that, it was 2 options. Either change was coming or change was never going to happen.
Yeah.
That this person was going to be general manager of the 2072 Vancouver Canucks. And, he'd just be, just here forever.
Arash, we're not even into December yet, and we're not even through this press conference yet, because the other thing that he did was right off the bat, he was, as he should have been, questioned about what is the deal with Travis Hamonic.
He was just on his way to go get the vaccination. He went over to the pharmacy and he, had, some second thoughts, I guess.
Jim Benning reveals that Travis Hamonic has received his second shot and is in the 2-week window before he can travel across the border without issue. And then Travis Hamonic decided to retire and raise golden retrievers with his family, and he decided that was he won multiple gold medals and golden retrievers, and
Westminster
then
dog
Pierre Dorian called and said, "Baby, I need you back," and he said, "No problem."
If he's just said that, it would have been fine.
It would have been it would have been so much easier, but.
Yeah, he's on his way to the pharmacy, and then I lost my keys, and then I got second thoughts.
And then I thought an ice cream would settle me down, so then I went and got a cone from McDonald's, and then I spilled it on my shirt, and then I said, well, I can't look like an idiot going into the vaccine place, spilling something on my shirt, so I went back home to change, and then realized I didn't have any shirts, and I was going to go wash it, and then I remembered I was wearing a white shirt, and I didn't have enough whites, and I didn't want to mix colors, so then I tried washing it out, and the problem is I got mint chocolate chip, and then I ended up mixing in some of the chocolate into the shirt, and then I didn't really have another shirt, so then I said, okay, well, I'm going to go down to the Joe Fresh at the Superstore and get a shirt. And then I showed up, and they're like, sir, you need a shirt to enter. And he said, well, I need to go buy a shirt. I don't have any shirts. He said, well, sir, you're out of luck. And then
Sir, can you just tell us where Travis Hamonic is?
So basically, Ryan, this is what happened. The Canucks, in the middle of November, 3-2 OT loss against the Anaheim Ducks, 7-1 loss against the Colorado Avalanche, 7-4 loss against the Vegas Golden Knights, 5-1 loss against the Anaheim Ducks, 4-2 loss against the Colorado Avalanche. Now, this is really important because this game, this Colorado Avalanche game, I attended. And again, this was the start of you started seeing fans bring paper bags. You saw fans start bringing in signs. You saw fans starting to wear specific custom-made jerseys of all the prior Canucks lost.
Best thing I've ever seen by this fan base.
Some of the most creative things we've seen from this fan base came in the absolute pit of despair.
Canucks radio voice Brendan Batchelor on the fan base's frustration as the team comes home.
They came home and they lost to Colorado, and, some of that anti-Benning sentiment, it wasn't wide swept by any means, but, there was a social media sort of presence and there were sort of scattered chants here and there in the building around that time.
They win 3-2 against Winnipeg, then a 1-0 loss against Chicago, 4-1 loss against Pittsburgh, 4-2 loss against Columbus, 3-2 loss against Montreal, 2-1 win against Montreal.
Yep.
6-2 win against Ottawa. Now those two games off the stretch they had come back, they had just come off of, was an outlier. And I don't know if you also remember, this was the idea that Francesco Aquilini is traveling with the team. He's in Montreal. He's there.
The team had actually won 2 games in a row coming into that game against Pittsburgh. They'd had a tough road trip, but they finished in Montreal and in Ottawa with wins. And I think when, it's easy now to look back at it and go, oh, the atmosphere that night was so toxic in the building that there was a real sense that something was going to happen. I didn't have that sense in the moment because I had been expecting something to happen for 2 or 3 weeks.
Vancouver Canucks lose 4-1. Tail ends of the third period, you start hearing in the 300 section, you start hearing the chants.
There is a lot of frustration in the stands here in Vancouver.
Now, you and I have disagreed quite a lot between each other in terms of when this would happen. We've discussed it on the podcast with Gita at the time when we thought that fans would boil over. When you witnessed this happen, what did you think? What was going through your head?
I was looking at Christmas lights at the PNE when this was happening.
Oh God, that was in December. Oh my God, I can't believe we're not even in the new year.
What I remember about that night, and I watched the highlights because it was a lack of, it was just empathy. Sorry, it wasn't empathy. It was apathy from the fan bases. Nobody seemed to care. The Canucks were embarrassed at home, didn't muster anything. It seemed like there were more Penguins fans in the crowd than Canuck fans. And we were at a point where the Canucks were playing so poorly at this point that it would have something catastrophic would have to happen. And it was like, okay, maybe they can rattle off 5 losses in a row and they really get embarrassed. Maybe something will happen. But having beaten the Ottawa Senators 2 days, 3 days prior in rather convincing fashion, it was almost like, oh, shucks, nothing is going to happen now. Because there had been like controversies, horrible play, confused front offices. The Canucks, this organization had gone through everything and nobody was getting fired for it. So in my mind at the time, you would have had to seen 5 straight 5-0 losses for anything to happen. So when this game happened and the fire betting chants were going down and the fans didn't seem to care, very apathetic, I thought there was no hope in hell or no chance that what would happen 24 hours later would go down.
Coming out of that game was certainly a very different feeling than going into it because of what transpired in the third period with the jersey being thrown on the ice and the chants being much more obvious. And, like I can remember us on the radio, we couldn't ignore them. We had to address them because you could hear them coming through on the rink noise effects for people listening. There is a sentiment out there that, at the radio station, we may be pro Canuck or we may have talking points passed to us from the organization, which is entirely untrue. So, in previous games, there had been some anti-Benning chants, but they were scattered. I couldn't hear them in my headset while I was calling the game. During the game, they weren't loud enough. You couldn't hear them. It wasn't a factor. That was the night it became a factor.
When that happened, and from my feelings of that Colorado loss, of the chants were actually starting at that Colorado game, but the DJ was so on it, just in terms of they picked breaks in play to start chanting, and the DJ, every time there would be a convenient whistle or there'd be a convenient thing, and the DJ's like, all right, Skrillex, and then he would hit the Skrillex one just to ground everything out. But then you saw in the Pittsburgh game, Canucks fans had nothing to cheer for. There was nothing. There was just nothing left. There was nothing in the gas tank. There was no optimism. There was no hope. And like you said, the most dangerous thing is when apathy festers, when hope is lost. Mm-hmm. At least, if you're having a bad season, you can think, oh, we're going to get a high draft pick, whatever. But again, they had the year before, they had just traded the 9th. And now you're saying, okay, we're 8-15-2?
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be different.
How in your right mind can you cheer as an intelligent fan? How can you cheer this team knowing exactly what they're going to do to continue to attempt to be the bare minimum in the NHL? Yep. There's no reason to cheer for it. It'd been down this road so many times. It felt like when the team didn't have these exciting pieces, where it was Bo and the Sedins and a bunch of warm bodies, you didn't really have a reason to get to your expectations to get to, fair. But when the team when you started to see some sort of a semblance of a young core put together, every opportunity to improve it or build on it was absolutely squandered in the dumbest way possible.
Right.
So why would you get excited about wins? It was just apathy. There was no reason to get excited because anything good that happened, they would bungle and fumble down the way.
that little stretch from the end of November into early December was just so, Ryan, like really to get to talking about Pucks on Net and what we do every Monday, I was dreading it.
Mm-hmm.
I love talking to you and Gita, but I was dreading having to even muster up any conversation about this. And that's when we started doing the Twitter Spaces, and that was a little cathartic, I think, where we just started talking to fans. We just needed to talk about, hey, not only is what we're going through just a culmination of this year, but it's also the culmination of the last 7 or 8 years that we've went through.
Sekeres and Price co-host Matt Sekeres on the quality of the Canucks' effort in the final days with Travis Green behind the bench.
It's always about the fans first and foremost, because the fans deserve better, particularly in this market, particularly in Vancouver, British Columbia, where it's been more than a half century without a Stanley Cup victory, and where we had, some unholy alliance of a bumblesome general manager and an interventionist owner, thinking that they could construct, without the benefit of analytics or a bigger tent, a Stanley Cup contender, or at least a playoff team, and they failed at that. I do think the players bear some responsibility. In fact, bear a lot of responsibility for what happened early last year. I don't think they particularly liked Travis Green. I think some of them had already tuned him out. There you go, another miscalculation on behalf of the upper management and front office that they would bring him back. And quite frankly, I felt like some players just flat quit on Travis and that staff, that they were playing to get him fired. I mean, it sure looked that way. I mean, you say demoralizing loss after demoralizing loss, and what made it so demoralizing was the pure lack of effort that you were seeing.
And here we go, Ryan. The day that none of us thought would actually come. December 5th, 2001. December 5th, early in the morning, Jim Benning was seen inside Rogers Arena cleaning out his desk. Reports first came out that Travis Green was fired, and then panic set in. Within the hour, it became clear that both Jim Benning and Travis Green were let go, and Bruce Boudreau was named head of the team. I remember this little sliver where we thought, there's no way he gets another coach.
It made no sense. It was an hour, less than an hour, but of just no. That's not how this
There's
works.
no way. The fan base. I mean, I understand there's some people who were very frustrated with Travis Green. This was not a Travis Green issue.
No.
There's no way that Travis Green was going to be the person who falls before what we had seen. Anyway,
you can make the argument that Travis Green lost the room or his messaging got stale, and that's fine. But you give him that is a big issue for sure, but an even bigger issue is the flawed, constructed team given to him.
They extended him just the summer before. And if you had any, again, this is costing the owner money because Travis Green is still being paid. He's still being paid. This is the Torts thing. He came in and, he put in one Murphy bed and lived in Point Roberts and they let him go. And man, he took that money and was like, well, I'm just going to go to NBC. Because that's what they know how to treat dogs there.
Rinkwide Podcast host Jeff Paterson's thoughts going into Francesco Aquilini and Stan Smyle's press conference following the firing of Travis Green and Jim Benning.
I remember going in, and I say this with all due respect, but my expectations of a Francesco Aquilini press conference are remarkably low. I know that he loathes sitting there. Certainly in that situation, he had to know that there were going to be all sorts of pointed questions. I just remember sitting there, and I had one of the seats in the Norm Jewison media room as Stan. Like, it just kind of felt like he was waiting for. It didn't really matter what the question was. He was just going to take it and run with it, right?
December 6th, Francesco Aquilini and Stan Smyle meet with the media. Ryan, when I talked about there being a member of this organization that was here all along, that they could have put in front of a microphone that would have brought I feel that even if Stan Smyle was told, you need to go out there and lie, which I don't, again, he wouldn't do, but I just for humor me, his ability to speak honestly and confidently, when Stan broke away from Francesco's little beginning part of the address to the media, That was the first actual moment after 8 years where this franchise felt something.
I have been a Canuck for 40 years. This is my team, my only team. I will always do what's best for this organization. I will always step up when asked to help. Bottom line, our performance this season has not been good enough.
A sense of pride.
A sense of, oh, this is what we were.
Yeah.
This is after the 7 to 8 year long bender that we never wanted to go on. This is what it is all about. And this person, this captain of this organization, has been here all along.
Canucks radio voice Brendan Batchelor on Stan Smeal's impassioned comments.
It was a complete shift in messaging where he sat down and he spoke with such clear passion for the organization and such honesty about, not just where things had gone wrong, but where they needed to go to get back to where he believes as, one of the icons of the franchise. And like, he is a lifelong Canuck. And you could just tell, with the passion that he spoke about the organization, that it was something that was so close to his heart that had really affected him.
Well, it's funny when Trevor Linden was front facing and the president, he never kind of talked about the pride of being a Canuck. He was more spoken corporate speak, and we all loved Trevor Linden because he was all of our favorite players in the 90s. But like, there was never this like, I take pride in that jersey. I take pride being a Canuck. I love, this is my home. It never was that with him. And then when Steamer came out, and like, I'm in my mid-30s, I barely remember Stan Smeal playing. I know my dad talked highly about him, and that's great. And so that name connection, that recognition is there. But when it's Smeal coming out with only Frankie, it just made me think of all the people that have been driven away from this organization. Your Trevor Lindens, your front office staff, your franchise players. There's nobody left. There's just the one guy. There's just Steamer, and it's the guy that everybody always forgot about, and everyone thought he did a good job, and that respect never was there. And he came out and he spoke and he said everything I needed to hear as a lifelong fan. There was a sense of pride. There was an honor in being a Canuck that, quite frankly, we never heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always, there's pride in being a Flyer. There's pride in being a Detroit Red Wing or a Toronto Maple Leaf or whatever. Vancouver, anytime you talk about the team, that's a really nice city. This is the first time I can remember where it's like, no. The Canucks are important. I'm a Canuck. This is important, and this needs to change.
Yep.
And I would have bought anything. I would have followed Steamer into the battlefield after that.
I think
it was everything
I think,
I needed to hear at that point, and I'm sure the fan base did too.
I think everyone was. That was the sobering talk the morning after.
Mm-hmm.
That we all needed. That was the palate cleanser we all needed.
This is the thing people forget, is it went from literally, this is how quickly the mood around the team, around the organization, and in the city shifted. There were fire-bending chants and jerseys being thrown on the ice on the Saturday night. And on the Monday night, Bruce There It Is was born.